Hey everybody out there, my name is Tommy and this is my channel, Counting on the Big Sleep. Trying to make some satire videos, been doing it for about a year now, and I also started a vlog. Um, this should be number 10. Number 10. We discussed um, last video about having the IRS come in and confiscate all my money out of my bank. They took all the checking and savings accounts out. You know, 2 weeks before I have to have rent due, which kind of sucks since I've been out of work and just been working, maybe a little part time and some side jobs. You know, uh, my bank accounts are frozen until August 13th. So even when I do get paid, they'll have to send me a check in the mail, which I'm sure they're not going to be happy about. You know, do have to call the IRS. I don't know what to tell them. I'm out of work. I can't make the payments. I owed some money to the IRS. We talked about this in the last video. Um, today's Sunday, early morning. I just felt like I needed to get some things off my chest. It's been very difficult ever since I've lost my job. Um, I've applied for over 255 jobs, and I've not done that well. I have had a few jobs here and there that I've gotten fired from, or they say, it's not working out. And my latest job, I got word today that, doing the medical stuff, that it wasn't working out. You know, um, you know. So now I find myself out of a job. IRS confiscates all my money, and my rent is due in 2 weeks. So the next plan, the next plan of attack. I'm not really sure. I'm gonna try and apply for some more jobs this week. I'm gonna call my landlord in a week. You know, week before I have to pay the rent, and explain to her that my bank accounts have been frozen until August 13th, and if she can postpone an eviction and give me a little time to get this back together. But the truth of the matter is, I need a full-time job. You know, I thought, you know, doing the side jobs and the little side hustles, that I could make it, and I have been making it. You know, I mean, I've barely been making it, but I have been making it. You know, so I have to do that in a week. I have to figure out a way how to make money, but I can't have them send it to my bank account. I gotta start either a new bank account somewhere else, or I have to have some kind of card they put money on, and then I have to work it out with my landlord to see how I can pay through that. Um, it's been a rough year. Age 57, lost my job. Got a job at a car wash. They said I was fired. It wasn't working out very well. Got a job at a meat packing plant, which was extremely hard. That job I should have kept. I should have just stuck with it and, busted my ass as much as I can. But I didn't think they were going to hire me anyway. I just didn't have it, you know, the stamina, the strength, and everything. Because these guys work really hard. I mean, you start working, you don't get a first break or anything. You get like a 20-minute lunch break and maybe a 10 to 15-minute break at the end. That's it. And the bad part is that when you go on break or lunch, you had to, take off your uniform and everything, you know, and And that took up time too. So when it came to lunchtime, after I got undressed and everything, and then punched out, you know, close to 5-10 minutes have already gone by. So they really didn't give you much time. But in reality, I probably should have kept that job. But I thought I could do a little better. I thought I could, you know. So then I got a job at medical courier. Um, Trained for a while, just part time. You know, it was just enough to what I was doing to be able to pay the rent and keep the lights on. You know, and doing little side hustles here and there. You know, I'm using my phone this time. I'm just seeing if the picture will be better and stuff. You know, so now I'm really kind of stuck. You know, because now I have no job. But I do have some side hustles to make a little bit of money, you know, to keep some food going, but not enough to pay the rent. So, my next step really is to find a full-time job. I gotta call the landlord, see if they can hold off on an eviction and give me a little time to get the money together, you know. I've been paying the rent. I've been here for 6 to 7 months now, and I've always paid the rent right on the first. Especially when I was working full time. That was no problem. You know, I was paying the rent, making sure everything gets paid, making sure the IRS gets paid, making sure, my credit card got paid, you know. But when I lost my job, things started spiraling out of control. The next step is, like I said, is to try and find a full-time job. It's a little harder when you're 58 years old and you've only done, I've been working at the same job for over 8 years, so I knew how to do my job. But when they let me go, we left on bad terms. And they called and told me that, hey, not only are you out of here, but you can never work for our company again. And you can never work for any company that is associated with us, which is a lot of companies. A lot of companies. I don't want to get into specifics, but it's a business that owns a lot of different bus companies and stuff, So I've been kind of having a hard time finding a job, even though I didn't like the meatpacking plant. It was a lot of hard work, and I should have stuck with that more and just tried my best to keep up with people. But I made the decision, to leave, try my hand at something else, But finding myself at the age of 58 now, and I've applied for over 255 jobs, and I really haven't gotten any calls, Life has just been really tough. Trying to form a plan on how to get myself out of this mess. I'm not here asking for any money or donations or anything like that, So, I'm not. I'm just telling you my story about how this year has spiraled out of control, and it's been extremely hard. Mm, I'm stuck right now. I'm stuck. I enjoy making videos. It does give me something to do, take my mind off of things. I know there's a lot of people out there that are worse off than me. I understand that. I understand, and I have sympathy for these people. I don't know why I'm doing this video. I'm just talking, trying to get things you know, off my chest. This is a bit of a therapy for me to talk about these things. Um, like I said, the next move has to be looking for a full-time job, dealing with my landlord, dealing with the IRS. I feel very overwhelmed. You know, I'm a procrastinator. I put things off sometimes. You know, but my last job, like I've said before, I was planning on retiring. I'm at 57. I had like 5 years to go. And for this to happen, and I'm sure it's happened to a lot of people. A lot of people have been at jobs for a very long time, and they're thinking, I am going to retire. You know, I can tolerate this job. I'm just going to keep doing it. But that did not work out. So if anybody has any ideas, I'd appreciate it. Like I said, this is not some kind of sob boohoo story. I'm not asking for money or donations or anything like that. I'm just talking, trying to get things off my chest. The lady that cost me my job in the first place, I made a bad move. I seen her at a gas station, and she waved to me. She was trying to be friendly. But I was in such a dark place that I just started flipping her off and calling her a bitch and stuff. Which was wrong. I shouldn't have done that. That was probably a bad idea. That might have made my situation even worse. See, I'm the type of guy that when bad things happen, I have a tendency to make things even worse. I wish I knew why, but that's the way it is. So, trying to change these habits, seeing if I can't bounce back at the age of 55, somehow, some way. Had a job interview at a microbrewery plant, loading trucks and stuff. Thought I had the job. The guy said he liked me and he was going to send the paperwork up to, to HR. And then I got a letter a few days later that says, we decided to go with another candidate. I don't know what I did wrong. I thought I had a good interview with the guy. The guy seemed really like me. But, that's the way that one went. And I get it. I applied for over 255 jobs. I got over 200 rejection letters that say, sorry, even though, you applied and, nothing really against you, blah, 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 we decided to go with another candidate. So that's been my luck. I think a lot of it is I'm old. I'm older. I look older. I got gray in my beard. My hair's falling out. My teeth are falling out. So I'm not sure if that's one of the reasons why I'm having a hard time, finding work. You would think, and I'm not trying to say anything bad, but you would think that with all the deportations, deporting people, that jobs would open up. But actually, the opposite has happened. Companies are realizing that you take so many people out of the economy. And I'm all for getting rid of the bad guys. But the average, Hispanic who came in this country illegally, they're working hard, they're paying taxes, and they haven't committed any crime. I think there should be a path to citizenship for them. But like I said, they're rounding up people left and right. Even if you just came into this country illegally, even if you've committed no crimes, they're rounding you up and they're sending you out. But you would think that, like I said, if you deport so many people, companies are going to need jobs, need people to fill in that jobs. But that's not necessarily true. What I found out is that with less people in the economy, the companies don't have to produce more. They don't have to produce more because you got, thousands and thousands of people that are no longer consumers. So companies don't have to produce as much, so they don't have to hire people. They can just work with the people they have. And it's been a pretty rough year. Honestly, I'm not saying bad things about Trump. I think the way he's doing the immigration is a little heavy-handed. I understand getting rid of the bad people, commit crimes and everything, but rounding up people the way they're doing is a bad look for America. And it is not helping the economy at all. That's the truth. It's not helping the economy. Now, I've also noticed that wages have come down. I've seen companies now that are hiring for $12, $13 an hour. Even the minimum wage is supposed to be around $15 an hour. They're not giving it to you. Some sort of loopholes, I guess. I have no idea why a company would advertise if they work in the state of Illinois for a lower amount like that. And at $13, $14 an hour, you're not going to be able to afford an apartment. Apartments nowadays go from anywhere, a one bedroom, can go for anywhere from $1,000 to about $1,200, $1,300. So you would have to make a decent amount of money to do that. But this is not about all that. I'm just coming on, talking to people, telling them my experience, how I see things have been going, how my life has changed dramatically from, having a good job, making good money, to losing that job, and then finding it hard to get another job. Especially when you're an older individual like myself. It's rough out there. I know and I hope that things will get better, but I feel like I need some sort of change. Some sort of change. And I don't know what it is. That's the problem. Not knowing what my next step will be or how to get myself out of this mess. I know I have to take things one step at a time. I've tried temporary agencies too. I'm never getting any calls from them either. And, when I do apply for jobs, like I said, I get basically rejection letter says, hey, thank you for applying, but we decided to go with another candidate, It's been a rough year, and if you're having a rough year, I totally understand. Things are extremely tough out there. The wealth gap is increasing. The rich are getting richer, the poor are getting poorer, and the middle class is shrinking. It's a sad state of affair that this country is in. So, I just wanted to come on, talk a little bit, get some things off my chest. If anyone has advice out there, I'd really appreciate it. Um, you know, it wouldn't have been so bad if they hadn't confiscated all the money I've saved. Because I was living off my savings, plus a little bit of, part-time work here, and a little side hustles here. Even though I wasn't making a ton of money, I was able to keep the roof and the lights on. Now with this happening, confiscating all my money, I don't have the money for the rent. And I have 2 weeks to come up with it. And I'm not trying to say some boohoo story. I'm not asking for money or anything, I'm not begging or anything like that. I'm just telling you, and I'm getting this off my chest, of how my life has started to spiral downhill. 2025 has been one of the roughest years I've had. The funniest thing, though, is in January, when the new year started, they have this online. There's a guy who does astrology. So for shits and giggles, I contacted him and had him do a reading for me. He told me this would be a good year for me. He said, this year we see you making, lots of money and, moving on up in the world. It's basically what he was telling me. And the whole thing has been the opposite. Not only have I not making more money, I'm falling deeper and deeper into a hole. So, my next plan of action really is to call the IRS, see if I can work something out. Because once they take that money out of the bank, you don't get it. And like I said, my bank account's locked up until August 13th, which means I can't have anything, put in my bank. So any checks that I do get from my, temp job or my part-time job won't be able to go into my bank account until after August 13th. And which they'll send it out on next Friday. It'll get rejected, or the IRS may confiscate that too. So, this is just my little rant about how things are going, how this year has gone, and I'm not blaming anybody else. I lost my job. I shouldn't have lost my job. I should have been better prepared. But after working for a company for 8 years, I did start taking advantage of things. And I think I brought some notices, to me, from higher ups, which led to my downfall. The one thing I did learn about if I do get another job, stay out of the office, keep to yourself, don't let people know very much about you. You can be friendly and say hi and that, but keep your distance. Keep your distance from big bosses, from people you may work with, because they might, want to move up that ladder and they see you as an obstacle in the way, I don't know if that's what really happened. I can't explain why I lost my job. I can't explain why. I know exactly why. know, exactly why. I work for a company that has a no tolerance for THC products. And I've been with the company for 8 years. And it's not like I smoke a lot of pot or anything like that. But the last month or so, I didn't go to dispensaries. What I've been doing is I went to these bakery shops that sell, hemp products, low THC, and which really did kind of help me sleep. And I'd only been doing this for, maybe 2 weeks. I didn't think it would be building up in my system like it did. So you can fail a drug test if you're doing CBD. That is the truth, because you don't know, especially in a bakery, that's something that's like really unregulated. You don't know what's in these things. And so, I've been doing these things for about 2 weeks, trying, it was helping me sleep. I enjoyed it. I never, ever, ever, after the 8 years I've been there, called into the office and demanded that I do a drug test right then and there. And the weird thing about it was that I was going on vacation. Saturday was my last night. I was going on vacation. I had an hour and a half left in my time. And one of the bosses, which I have nothing to do with, she's in charge of, what do they call her? Transportation manager, which really has nothing to do with me, but she is a boss. And for some reason, she burst in there like on a Saturday night, an hour and a half before I was leaving for my vacation. And she demanded that I do a drug test right then and there. She said that, if I don't do this, I'm fired. And I'm like, well, I go on vacation in an hour. I'm leaving in an hour. She says, that doesn't matter. That doesn't matter. You have to do this. If you don't do it, you're fired. I said, well, I'm going on vacation in an hour. Would I get my vacation pay if I decide not to do this? She says, no. No. She says, the only way you'll get your vacation pay is if you do the test, and it'll take them a week, to get the results. By that time, if you pass, you're great. If you don't, then you're fired. But since it's been a week and you've already put in your vacation pay, then you can get it. And I thought, well, I've been doing the hemp products, Is there THC in my system? I don't know. I honestly didn't know. I didn't know if I was going to fail or not. So I took the chance to do the tests. Well, lo and behold, they found small traces of THC in my system. I was like, oh, fuck. So they have a no tolerance policy. So I talked to them and I said, if I resign right now, will they mess with my CDL license? And they're supposed to. They're supposed to. They're supposed to, when that happens, you're supposed to get, referral to go to this clearinghouse, and it's going to cost you money. And I paid some money because at first, they sent me these letters that says that I have to report to this place. So I went there I reported. I paid the money. I thought, oh, okay, I'll do the classes, cleared up. And the guy said, hey, then you'll get a back to work order. I said, okay, great. So I paid the money, and he looked it up and he said, well, there's nothing been reported yet. So I thought, well, hold on to the money. Yeah, this could be reported. So a few days went by, and my union shop steward called me, and he said that, hey, you tested positive for THC. This is what we're going to do. We're not going to report it to DOT, but you are banned from working from our company. Not only are you banned from working from our company, you are banned from any company that does business with us. And I thought, wow, that's a lot of companies. I was working for We Drive You. When I started with this company in 2016, it was Sadro Trucking. Then it changed to Free Enterprise. Then it changed to We Drive You. No, it changed to Free Enterprise. Then it changed to National Express. Then it went to We Drive You. And they had shipped me all over the place. I was working in Hammond for a while. Then I worked in Chicago for a while. And then I got, the same company, which wasn't We Drive You at the time. It was still National Express. I found they had another company right in, closer to my house. So I was able to transfer, closer to my house. And then a year ago later, We Drive You came in and took over that company. And made things a lot more difficult. Which was fine. I was dealing with it. But like I said, 8 years, I've never had to do a drug test right on the spot. It was just really weird and felt very personal that this lady would bust in an hour and a half before I was supposed to leave for vacation. It felt very personal. I don't think she liked me very much, even though I've known her since 2016, which I didn't understand. I really didn't understand. What I think happened, though, is they started hiring people in my department who didn't have CDLs. I think they felt that my job didn't really require a CDL, so they could pay these people less. And I had been there for so long doing that job that I was making good money. But, like I said, it was my fault for doing the hemp products. Like I said, I don't know how much THC was in some of these. It's not like it was a dispensary. It was a bakery. And they were selling, cookies and brownies, drinks and stuff like that. And I would have one, after work. I would get a brownie or something to help me to relax and sleep at nighttime. It's not like I've been doing it a long time, But it's just weird that somehow they picked me out. It might have been because, right before I was going on vacation, I went into the office. I told them that I was going on vacation. I'm leaving tomorrow. So when I was coming back from lunch, a lady pulled out there. The same lady that, gave me the drug test pulled out there, and she started talking to me, And for some strange reason, she got this big grin on her face, like she knew something. Maybe I had some kind of smell on me, because in my building alone, there are people that smoke pot right out in the hallway, right outside. I live in Illinois. People smoke pot all over the place, you know. So maybe she smelt it on me, but I would think, at least I thought that we were friends, and if something like that would have happened, then, she would have said something. But a lot of people at work told me that, since they hired a new guy, and I talked to him sometimes, and I think he's seen me having, not seen me having, but maybe he smelled something on me, and he went to the boss and told them, and that started that ball rolling. I honestly don't know why I was picked out for this drug test. I mean, I can understand we all take drug tests at work. Send me to a clinic. 8 years, they've always sent me to a clinic. I passed my, 4-panel screen test, and all the time, and no problem. It just so happens that, I just started trying some of these CBD hemp products. I didn't think it would that big of a deal. But apparently even a small amount of THC in your system gets you fired. And like I said, they didn't report it to DOT, which would have been nice because I could have taken the classes and gotten a return to work order. But they didn't do that. What they did was, let me go. Told me I was banned from all these companies. Like I said, Sidewell Trucking, Free Enterprise, National Express, We Drive You, River Valley Metro, Pace. I can't work for Pace. I don't know what to say, but it's been 4 months now, and I've been trying to find work, and I haven't been very successful. And I've applied for these companies too. I reapplied, hoping that, they can give me a second chance. Which, honestly, I think if you get caught, with some THC in your system, you should get suspended, do the classes, and then get it back to work order. That's what I thought, probably would have happened. That's what I was hoping that would happen. But for some reason, they went full throttle and banned me from all these companies. So I've been having a very hard time getting a job. Which takes me up to today. It's been 4 months. Working a little bit part-time, doing some plasma, selling plasma to make money, doing some side hustles, getting all the money together for the rent, just keeping the rent over my head. But then when the IRS came and confiscated all my money, it made me spiral down even further, because now my bank accounts are frozen until the 13th. I have to call the IRS to see what I can do, because I'm basically out of work. I don't make a lot of money. And the minimum payments for the IRS was $100, and the minimum payments for the state was $50. My taxes got screwed up. I explained that all in the last video. When the COVID hit, my taxes got screwed up. And so I wound up owing money. But it's been a rough year. I'm still here. No matter what happens, I'm going to keep on trying. I'm going to keep on living. I'm having a bad year so far. Not good. but I've been surviving. Making videos, trying to, I've started 4 channels over a year ago, and I have not been successful at any of them, really. I mean, I get some subscribers, but nowhere near the 1,000 subscribers, nowhere near the amount of views I need. So, what I'm asking is, I have 4 channels. If you're interested in any of these, one channel is a gaming channel. One channel is a coin collecting channel, and collecting toys, collecting coins, collectible coins and stuff. One channel is more satire, trying to make some humorous videos. And one channel is about how to improve your life, how to get rid of anxiety, how to, achieve your goals. And so far, I can give the advice on how to do that. I'm just not able to pull it off yet. So right now I'm a little stuck. But this is not a boohoo video. I'm just telling you my story to let you know that sometimes bad things happen. And sometimes you put stuff off for too long, and it comes back to bite you in the ass. And in this economy, it's been really rough. It's been really rough. And I'm not blaming it all on Donald Trump. I'm not saying he's the worst president in the world. I'm not a big fan of the way he's been rounding up people. I don't think that's the right approach. But who am I to say? I don't run the world. I'm just a squirrel trying to get a nut. That's all. But at age 58, it's very difficult to get that nut. But, like I said, this is not a boohoo story. I'm just talking, trying to get these things off my chest. Hopefully things will get better. I have to figure out my next actionable plan, because I have 2 weeks to come up with the rent. I'm thinking, waiting one more week. I'm going to do my best to apply for more jobs this week, maybe go into places. I know making, say $12 or $13 an hour it will help, but it's going to make things very tight. See, I used to make, when I worked for the bus company, I was making, I worked there for 8 years, and I started out at $14 an hour, busting my ass, and I worked hard every day, and then, eventually after, the 8 years, I finally made it up to at least $21 an hour, and I was like, all right, and I even took an apartment closer to my work so I wouldn't have to travel too far. And, but yeah, that hasn't really worked out very well. It really hasn't. So, the moral of the story is, try to keep your nose clean, do your job. The people you work at are not always your friends, especially your big bosses. They're not really your friend. There's a business to run. Do the best you can. Protect yourself at all times. Keep to yourself. Just do your job. And, try to stay employed. I tell you one thing. You know, a lot of people say on YouTube, oh, you know, quit your job, you know, do these side hustles, you know, Uber, you know, driving Lyft, you know, DoorDash and stuff like that. And I've been doing side jobs like that. And honestly, I find it more stressful scraping by with a little bit of money here and there, trying to get things paid for, when to me, it's much better to have a full-time job. Even if you're not that happy with your job, if it's paying a decent price and you're getting a regular paycheck every week, that's what I would do. That's what I'm looking for now. You know, because the part-time work and the gigs here and there are not really going to get you anywhere. I mean, like I said, you see these YouTubers all over the place. I quit my job because I hated it. Now I'm independent and I work, you know, Uber. I watch this one guy who works Uber. You know, he works 7 days a week. He has to rent a car. And that rent-a-car costs him $300 every week. So right off the bat, the first $300 he makes, you know, for that week, he has to give that for the car rental place. But he's making it work, you know. He's working 7 days a week, maybe like 12, 13 hours a day, you know. And this guy's in his 70s, you know. And he's even done videos where, you know, he wanted to quit. You know, he's another guy. He's a good guy. I will give a plug to his channel. It's Daddy O Money. Daddy O Money on YouTube. Very interesting guy. You know, if you want, you could check out his channel. You know, he talks a lot about Uber driving and you know how he hates Trump and he wants to have his voice heard and stuff like that. But you know, if you got questions about Uber and stuff like that, you know, he might be a good guy to talk to. You know, Uber and stuff. To me, to do Uber, you have to have a nice car. So you would have to rent a car. I would have to rent a car, and I know that's going to cost me about $300 a month, and you have to pay that up front. And then every week you got to pay $300 for this car, even though they'll take care of the car. You know, oil change, new tires, whatever. You know, you're just basically renting this car. You know, and Uber has their own system. You know, they go through. I forgot what car dealership he's going through. With Uber. Avis. I think he's doing Avis. He's renting a car from Avis. You know. But he's in his 70s, and you know, like I said, he works 7 days a week. I'm 58. I do not want to work 7 days a week. I'm not even sure. I'm going through my midlife crisis, this whole panic thing about losing my job. You know, having my life uprooted the way it is, and trying to figure out how to get myself out of this mess. You know. But, like I said, this is not a boohoo video. This is just a story I'm telling you. You know, if you're interested and, you know, you like the vlogs, you know, give it a thumbs up. I have 4 different channels, you know. If you ever want to check them out. My name is Tommy Krynock. You know, try to find full-time work, or try to build up these YouTube channels. And let me tell you, I'm sick of these people telling me that, you know, if you want extra income, start a YouTube channel. So, I'm not a great speaker. I'm not a good storyteller. I'm just being totally honest with everybody. And don't make the same mistakes I've made. You know? Do something with your life. You got a job? Do the best you can at it. Stay away from people in the office. Stay away from people that you work with. You know, be friendly. But don't get too friendly. You never know what someone's agenda is going to be. And I may sound a little paranoid, but this is not the first time this has happened to me. You know, become friends with people at work. The next thing you know, things are being said about you. People don't like you anymore. You know, because they're trying to get rid of you so they can move up the ladder. So I'm just saying, be cautious of what you do. Take care of your business. Don't let it slide. You know. And, maybe, get into a career. You know. I have a CDL. I can drive. But a lot of the companies that I can drive for, I'm banned. And I'm sure they're not giving me a good reference. I'm sure they're pretty mad. And, in a lot of ways I'm sorry this happened because I let my guard down. I should have been more attentive. I shouldn't have been doing the edibles. Like I said, I wasn't getting them from a dispensary. It was a little bakery hemp shop, which was selling Delta 8 and THCO, which I'm not really sure what that is. But they were saying that, a lot of this stuff just comes from THC, small amounts. And I asked him, would I pass a drug test? He's like, you should pass a drug test. But when it comes down to it, these bakeries probably are unregulated. So you really don't know how much THC is in something like a drink. Because it doesn't really tell you. It didn't really tell you how much is in here. The brownies were homemade and stuff too. So it didn't really tell you. But like I said, it's not a dispensary. So they can't sell real marijuana. They can sell the CBD stuff. And they can sell the THCO stuff. And they can sell hemp, which they derive a little bit of THC from. But I don't want to keep you here all night. I just wanted to explain, or I just wanted to talk to someone and get it off my own chest. Whether if you like this video or not, give it a thumbs up. And thank you for listening.